Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. On the third anniversary of Russia's war in Ukraine, tensions escalate between Presidents Trump and Zelensky. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis joins us on America's shifting priorities in this long war.
Donald Trump said he was going to end this war. I think if you look at it, whether you're somebody that's very supportive of Ukraine or not as much, there doesn't appear to be a great pathway for a total Ukraine victory.
And the producers of the Netflix thriller 0 Day tell a story of a massive cyber attack that changes life in America. The showrunner behind hits like Narcos, Eric Newman.
At some point, one of these vulnerabilities is going to be exploited, and it's going to make a huge difference.
I love end-of-the-world movies. This is like a little too close to truth.
Plus, the rest of today's stories that got us squawking, what consumers are buying at Home Depot, the Trump tariff threat that will go forward, and Elon's email deadline. It's back.
You're sort of semi-fired or you're fired.
It's Tuesday, February 25th.
It's a leap year.
Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Last year was
It
goes with election years,
that's
which
right.
I didn't figure out until recently. It seems that it tees up with election years, too.
Right. Sorry.
Good morning, everybody.
Apologize.
Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. We are all here. We're ready to go. U.S. equity futures.
I'm delighted to welcome President Macron back to the White House.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear Donald. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs.
We're on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that's moving along very rapidly. We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico. The tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule.
President Trump says the tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico will go forward when a month-long delay expires. That's set to expire next week. The president making those comments at a White House press conference. It's unclear if they represent a negotiating tactic, as it always is, unclear. Trump imposed tariffs on Mexico and Canada on February 1st, only to pause them 2 days later and to promise negotiations after the country's respective presidents pledged to enhance their border policing efforts.
Meantime, Elon Musk's deadline passed overnight for federal workers to email a list of their 5 accomplishments from last week. That was a directive that had been met with a lot of confusion after many department heads told workers not to respond to it. And the Office of Personnel Management contradicted Musk's threat, telling government HR officers that responses to the email were voluntary. But last night in a post on X, Musk doubled down on those who don't answer the email, saying subject to the discretion of the president, they will be given another chance. Failure to respond a second time will result in termination. Musk also posted, quote, the email request was utterly trivial, as the standard for passing the test was to type some words and press send. Yet so many failed even that inane test, urged on in some cases by their managers. Yesterday at the White House, President Trump called Elon Musk's email a pretty ingenious idea.
What he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist. They're trying to find, that's how badly various parts of our government were run by, and especially by this last group.
Sources tell NBC News that responses to Musk's email are expected to be fed into an AI system to determine whether those jobs are necessary.
Man.
I watched yesterday, and when Trump was talking about it with Macron there, he's like, it seems simple. If supposedly there are people that aren't even alive anymore that
Sure, and we would like to eliminate those people 100%.
Right.
The question is,
so
how
all
do
you got to do is answer.
The problem becomes if you're Cash Patel.
You don't like this either?
There are Trump cabinet members. No, it's just complicated because the government's so complicated. Cash Patel, who is the FBI director, the Department of Defense, the Homeland Security, they've all said don't respond to these things.
But only because, and Trump, did you see Trump? He addressed that as well, right after.
But it's just a little confusing. You're getting mixed messages from different places.
Well,
it's happening pretty
Trump
quickly.
said Defense Department or FBI, anything that could be
sensitive information where you don't want that fed back in.
The ones that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just a I mean, just say, I'm here. They're not even looking for you to people
right,
to say,
but that was not what
that's
not what the first email said. That's the issue.
That's the issue? Why is that such an issue?
No, I don't think it's a big deal to send in 5, but I think the government is.
I'm all for saying.
You always say that, but then
reply
you say
reply to the email.
It always ends with a but.
No.
Okay,
the answer
you're for
is,
this then.
I am for rooting out and trying to figure out that there are people who are not on the payroll or who are
people are on the payroll
not working at all or don't exist.
Okay,
and so if the answer is send out an email and everybody please reply to it so we know whether there's another human being on the other end of it.
Right.
Great.
Okay. But
that's not what the original instruction was. The original instruction was tell us what you did last week and whatever it was, and the question is.
So you have a problem with listing your accomplishments?
No, the issue is that if in fact you're working for the FBI or you're working for some other group or whatever it is, and you're not supposed to do that, and you have managers telling you not to do it, then you have a problem. It's very hard to then determine what to do.
In some cases, it's like Kash Patel telling you not to do it. In other cases, it's the union telling you not to do it. There's a lot of mixed messages that are coming in from different places. OPM, I don't know where they fit into that.
I would like to figure out if there are people who are on the payroll who are not working
and my guess is,
or not alive.
If you're in doubt and if you have questions about it, my guess is you would send it in anyway.
It's just that there are certain parts of the political spectrum that don't want to do. They want to do absolutely nothing to the federal government, and they sing songs, and it's like constitutional crisis, and it's the end of democracy. We hear that everywhere. I mean, the amount. Everybody's bald because everybody's hair is already gone from being on fire. Jamie Dimon's got hair, though. The CEO said the U.S. government is inefficient and in need of work. In an interview with Leslie Picker, he was asked whether he supported efforts by Elon Musk's DOGE. He declined to give what he called a binary response, but his comments were, I guess we're interpreting them as overall supportive of the effort.
Here's what I support, okay? The government and everybody would know the government's inefficient, not very competent, and it needs a lot of work. And so you and I, it's not just waste and fraud, it's outcomes. Why are we spending the money on these things? Are we getting what we deserve? What should we change? So I think doing that needs to be done.
You can see more of Dimon's comments right now at CNBC.com.
Let's talk about Home Depot shares. The company coming in with earnings on an adjusted basis of $3.13. That is better than had been expected. We're going to be keeping an eye on this. Also, revenue numbers coming in better than expected, too. $39.7 billion versus the $39.2 billion the street had been anticipating. And comps are also much better than had been expected. This is going to be a big story, especially after what we had heard from Walmart earlier.
Down $14.
They're looking at comps up 0.8% versus the down 1.5% estimate. Now, the comp, what you're seeing right now, down 3.8%, my guess would be this is because of the guidance they are giving for the full year. They are talking about total sales being up about 2.8%, comps being up 1%, diluted earnings per share, or adjusted diluted earnings per share, they're now saying down about 2% from the $15.24 that they reported in the fiscal year 24. It takes a little bit of time to work through the numbers on this because the adjusted earnings per share that they came in with for fiscal 24 was much better than had been anticipated. $15.24 versus the range that people had been looking at for this spread. So you got to do the math on that. Down 2% would compare to the consensus estimates, which is around $14.61 to $16.22. So a pretty wide spread. And it's going to be better than the low end of those, but well below the high end of that estimate, too, for the consensus estimates that are coming in on this.
Down 2.5% now. It's
yeah,
not that much. But.
Yeah, I will say, let's continue to look through these numbers. I spoke with the CFO, Richard McPhail, and they talked about a lot of things. They don't see the overall landscape improving on the housing front. They don't think that rates are going to come down. That's not their best guesstimate for things. But they do think that they are better operationally, that they're performing better at about the best that they've ever seen with some of these things. He said that they have made some serious improvements when it comes to delivery experience, speed, and reliability. They say things like appliances and power tools as a result. They've been taking market share in those areas. They also say the online business comped up 9%, that's the biggest comps they've seen in a year. They also say for the pro customers, they're looking at things like drywall and concrete, where they've made a lot of improvements too. These are areas they've made investment. And so they say that they have seen a lot of gains in those areas. The pro business is a big deal for Home Depot, much bigger there than it is for Lowe's. They do say they're seeing continued pressure, though, when it comes to big renovations. And that's because of the slowness you've seen in the housing market. When you have a turnover in housing, that's when you see some of those bigger renovations. And as a result, they're seeing pressure still on things like flooring and kitchens. However, the CFO, Richard McPhail, said that when you're triangulating all of this, they're trying to figure out how things go. And again, they're not expecting improvement in the housing market because they're not expecting rates to drop from where we are here. It's just how the interest rates affect everything that you're seeing. Questions about the consumer, though, they do say the customers have been becoming more engaged. The momentum they saw in the third quarter bled into the fourth quarter, and they do see it bleeding into the current quarter as well. So they expect things that they're going to be well prepared for things like spring. They're running the business, as I say, as well as ever. Inventory and stock, staffing, delivering. He says they're getting better every day on these issues. My guess is that they are giving some pretty conservative guidance here. For total sales, they said up about 2.8% for 2025. Comps up about 1%. Gross margin up around 33.4%. Operating margin around 13%. All of those things are going to matter. And they say they did see big gains in the fourth quarter. 15 of 19 geographical regions saw gains. More than half of their product lines saw gains. And they do think the consumer is re-engaging on some of the smaller things.
It's still a daunting place.
It is.
It's their Sunday.
And you looked around and around?
No, I was, I asked 3 different people. I was looking for a Rubbermaid trash can to pick up the poop outside. The dogs poop. And
thank you for
And
clarifying.
I was out at aisle 70, and they told me it was like aisle 9. I'm like, what kind of place is, I'm like, and then I'm like, I wanted like a golf cart to get down to where I finally found it. It's a daunting. And
big place.
I see
they have a lot of
people,
stuff.
It looked like one guy was showing another guy at Home Depot, like a circuit board or something. I looked at it, it's like the stuff that goes on there for professionals.
Yeah.
It's
a big part of their business.
I succeeded successfully, and I was proud. I was a little bit proud, but it's not my thing. I don't think you're more of a Lowe's, the softer colors and stuff, and easier.
Lights.
Just my guy. My guy.
It is a very, very daunting play. I don't know what.
They said they're seeing more customers who are coming back in for the do-it-yourself type
average
projects.
people?
Yeah, like do-it-yourself type projects.
That's not a DIY does not, or whatever it is. It's not
DIY.
Right. DWI.
Tease will be next.
Still to come, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the Sunshine State was DOGE before DOGE. His plans for finding efficiency and much more.
Well, the government's spending too much money. I think everybody acknowledges that. So from a fiscal perspective, what DOGE is doing is they've put this issue on the front burner. They've highlighted a lot of things that should not be done. Now, I do think Congress is going to have to ratify that. I don't think you can just do it all through executive action.
Squawk Pod continues right ahead. This is Squawk Pod.
Stand Andrew by in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Up and Andrew. Cue. This is Mike.
You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, along with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick. JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon making comments on the state of the banking system and some of the expected deregulation that the industry could see under President Trump. CNBC's Leslie Picker asked Dimon about the regulatory posture in D.C. and whether or not the government is going far enough.
We have become a highly bureaucratic, litigious, over-regulated society, and it's bad. If you don't believe me, go to Europe. I'm not saying we shouldn't have regulations. We should protect the financial system, we should protect the food system, the water system, but what the American Post knows, this is bureaucracy completely run amok.
Dimon went on to say that it's time to take a step back from regulation and look at how to make the system safer rather than over-regulating. Meantime, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis forming a DOGE task force aimed at to sunset 70 state boards and commissions, cut 900 positions, and require reviews and audits of Florida universities. The governor saying Florida was DOGE before DOGE was cool. Governor DeSantis joins us this morning. Governor, thank you for joining us. We've had lots of debate about DOGE. I'm just curious, before we even get into what you're doing in Florida, what your take is right now on what we're seeing out of Washington, and even what we're seeing in terms of the debate about how to approach it. I think there's a whole group of people on one side saying that, we need to find these cuts. And then there's a whole other group of people, some who are saying that the cuts are good, but they don't like the way it's being gone about.
Well, the government's spending too much money. I think everybody acknowledges that. So from a fiscal perspective, what DOGE is doing is they've put this issue on the front burner. They've highlighted a lot of things that should not be done. Now, I do think Congress is going to have to ratify that. I don't think you can just do it all through executive action. But then you have the other issue of the constitutional imbalance that's been created in this country by Congress passing these omnibus spending bills. They pass continuing resolutions. That puts the government on autopilot. So these bureaucrats are never held accountable. Congress doesn't wield the power of the purse. And so that's why you see some of the bad behavior that you've seen in USAID and some of these other things. So I think both from a fiscal perspective, it's good. But I also think Congress needs to recover the power of the purse. The bureaucracy needs to answer to the president under Article 2, and that'll go a long way to getting our constitutional system back in whack.
What do you think about the prospect of sending checks to Americans, either in the context of thinking of them as dividends or refund checks, as opposed to taking that money and hopefully paying down the debt?
Well, if they're able to reduce spending enough that they're generating an annual surplus, well, of course, I would do some of that to retire debt and some of that rebate to taxpayers. But let's just be clear, they're a long way from getting to that point. I don't think you want to print additional money to be able to do that. And one of the things I think we see in Washington that's different than, say, a state like Florida. Like in Florida right now, our budget year over year, we cut $3.8 billion overall. Like, we're spending $3.8 billion less. What they say in Washington is, we're going to cut $1.5 trillion. That's over a 10-year budget window where they anticipate spending increases over 10 years. So they're still spending more, but just not as much as was forecast. So they count that as a cut. That's not a cut. So I think there is an imbalance between the momentum behind what Elon's doing, a lot of excitement. Certainly, my supporters are excited. Someone's finally getting in the federal government and doing this with DOGE. And then kind of the way the swamp operates in the Congress, where I don't see them being nearly as aggressive.
Governor, what's your relationship like right now with the president? I ask because, as you know, the president has endorsed Byron Donalds to be the governor in 2026. Just we
got a great relationship. I mean, we're working very closely together. I'm able to play. We play golf relatively frequently, I think, compared to others. And I've been a big supporter of what he's doing. Look, people can endorse whatever. I raised probably more money than him for 24 cycle than any elected official, millions and millions of dollars. Obviously supported him strongly. But, he supported a marijuana corporate amendment in Florida on our ballot that I opposed. We fought, we defeated it. That's fine. I still supported him. It is what it is. We have done more in Florida to support his agenda than certainly what Congress has done so far. I called a special session of the Florida legislature. We now have full spectrum support from state and local government for his immigration enforcement efforts. Tom Homan was speaking this weekend. He said everyone needs to do what Florida's doing. And then as part of our DOGE in the state of Florida, we're actually trying to return federal dollars that we haven't spent back to them. The Biden infrastructure package had a lot of strings attached. They wanted us to do woke stuff. So we rejected that. I think it was about $330 million. We tried to send it back to Biden. They didn't have a mechanism to accept the $330 million. So I think now with DOGE there, we're going to be able to send some money back. So I think we're working very closely on the policy. I also think talking about 26, it's so early. He's been president for like a month. Now is the time Republicans have been waiting for. All eyes in the Republican universe are on the Trump administration. That's been bold, but then will Congress work to ratify this? Will they actually cut spending? Will they do these things? You only get opportunities like this once a decade or every couple decades. So that's really, I think, the focus. Florida's done more than any state to support the agenda, and we'll keep doing that.
Governor, I probably should ask, when you're other governors just north of you, Brian Kemp, about some of the stories that I've seen written when some of these congressmen are going back to their home districts. And this gentleman went back to one outside Atlanta. And I think it was an R+10 county or something. But supposedly they're getting an earful, is what I'm hearing about. And I would say that watching you in Florida, there have been times where how all occasion that looked like it was against you. And you just plowed ahead, damn the torpedoes, and I think it paid off for you. Is that the advice you'd give the president right now? I mean, there are midterms coming up. I saw a Harvard study that most Americans are favoring things, but you've seen the opposing sides and the Democrats go after this administration for ending democracy and the Constitution in one fell swoop. Do you think you can go too far, or would you tell the administration to just damn the torpedoes, go for it?
Be bold. The reality is there's always going to be static. There's always going to be opposition. I think some of those people at that town hall probably weren't even from that district. I know during his first term, I was a U.S. congressman for a couple years. There were manufactured people that would come and scream at you, which is fine. I mean, it's a free country. So yes, move forward. And with the things that we did in Florida, I mean, the COVID stuff, I mean, I had the world against me there. We stood our ground. Kids were better off from being in school. Businesses flourished. Obviously, we've had a massive migration of both people, businesses, and wealth. Then you also look at things. I mean, we had tussles on this program about Disney. We stood up for what we thought was right in terms of the kids. We did remove some of their special privileges to put them on an even playing field with Universal and SeaWorld and the other parks. And the reality is now they're investing $18 billion into Florida. People were trying to say they were going to move Space Mountain to Columbus, Ohio or something. We knew that wasn't going to happen. So do what you think's right. Hold your ground. And the thing is if you're doing what you told your voters you would do, even people that disagree, they do respect that you're following through. So President Trump's following through on what he promised the voters. He said he was going to have Elon Musk do this with government efficiency. Everybody knew this was coming down the pike. And I think that there's more support out there than opposition.
So I'll ask you one other thing. And a lot of Trump supporters, I'm told, there are times when it's difficult to maybe explain or justify every single thing that President Trump does. And there's time when sometimes the supporters might feel uncomfortable. And this is out of your lane completely. But yesterday, presumably to make a deal to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, we voted with Russia and China and North Korea to not call Ukraine or to not call Russia responsible for the war. I mean, when you saw that, do you think getting a deal, or do you understand the rationale behind that decision? Because a lot of just conservatives and Republicans just are like, wow, it's hard to defend that for some people.
Well, I think the proof will be in the pudding, Joe. Donald Trump said he was going to end this war. I think if you look at it, whether you're somebody that's very supportive of Ukraine or not as much, there doesn't appear to be a great pathway for a total Ukraine victory. This has been going on. There's been a lot of deaths, hundreds of billions of dollars. And so the president wants to end it in a way that's going to lead to a sustainable peace. So if he ends up getting there, then I think all the negotiating tactics leading up to that, I don't think people are going to look back and have much problem. So the proof will ultimately be in the pudding, but I do think it's part of a larger strategy to be able to put this issue to bed. We do not want to have a war raging in Europe infinitum, particularly if it costs American taxpayers. He ran on ending this, and he's using the leverage that he has available to him to do it. We were at the White House on Saturday night, and I was next to Marco Rubio, and they're working very hard on this. So we'll see what happens. But I do think you got to look at it in the context of the art of the deal and trying to land this.
I agree, but what if
do you prefer the East Coast, or do you like the Gulf of America coast? No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Governor, I was just going to ask.
They're both good.
They are both good. Both coasts of Florida are great. Governor, I will ask you, though, is there a risk that he looks like Neville Chamberlain by appeasing and saying, we're not going to call you the aggressor for doing this?
Or worse.
Well, but here's the thing. I mean, we've seen Donald Trump. The guy takes forceful action. He believes in strength. I mean, this is the guy that snuffed out the leading Iranian terrorists. He snuffed out al-Zarqawi. He's been very strong. A lot of our enemies, when he came into office, especially on the heels of Biden, they took a step back. He had a tussle with Colombia that ended very quickly. So I don't think so, just because I've seen him act in so many different ways. And he's somebody that isn't hesitant to use American power to advance American interests. But I do think he wants things to be focused on America's interest. I think focusing on Europe's not pulling their weight with NATO has been something he's talked about a long time. There's a lot of truth to that. Europe does need to do more for their collective defense. So I don't really see the risk of that. He's a strong president.
Okay. Some things finally do seem to, years later, it's like, oh my God, the craziest stuff in the past that sometimes he said, it's like, holy crap. It's like, that was probably mostly true at the time. It's amazing that it happens. You got to admit it, Governor. Sorry, Andrew.
Just want to thank the governor.
Yeah, no, look, I think he's been right about a lot of stuff. That's just the reality.
Governor, I want to thank you for joining us as always. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Next on Squawk Pod, a tech billionaire with political pull, a massive attack that paralyzes the U.S. economy, and Robert De Niro as a popular former president. The makers of the Netflix thriller 0 Day join us. Producer and investigative reporter Michael Schmidt on the inspiration.
It is not in vogue to have a factual-based view of the world and to try and see the world for what it is.
And Noah Oppenheim on when life meets art.
We wanted to take a look at what we think is the biggest challenge facing the country and the world, which is this fractured media landscape and our really challenged relationship with the truth.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Squawk Pod.
You're here standing up for the little guy, the working man? Well, there are working men and women buried right beneath our feet, right here. You don't trust the government? I get that. It hasn't always come through for everybody, but this isn't about the government or the 1% or whatever the hell you want to call them. It's about somebody out there that hates us, that stands against everything that we stand for, everything that makes us who we are. And they found a way to hurt us. It's that simple. And right now, these people need to get back to work and get those people out. And you need to let them. You want to stand by and offer your support and your prayers, that's great. But please, just do it from behind the barricade.
That was a moment from the new Netflix limited series 0 Day. It stars Robert De Niro. And join us right now are the co-creators of the show, writers and executive producers. It's a political thriller. Eric Newman is here, the showrunner behind some of Netflix's biggest hits. Michael Schmidt, also the New York Times investigative reporter. And Noah Oppenheim, former president of NBC News and writer of so many other great films. This is now #1 globally on the Netflix platform. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so the reason we wanted to have you in here is, if you watch this show, there's like a realistic potential thing maybe happening. Well, that's what I worry about. And I think if you're a business leader / person trying to figure out what you're supposed to do, it creates a lot of complex issues. What did you do? Where did this idea come from, and how realistic do you actually think it is?
Well, hopefully it's pretty realistic. Yeah. Obviously Mike and I are journalists, and as you mentioned, Eric's created some of Netflix's biggest hits like Narcos, which is obviously grounded in the real world. We wanted to take a look at what we think is the biggest challenge facing the country and the world, which is this fractured media landscape and our really challenged relationship with the truth. And when a crisis unfolds against that backdrop where nobody can kind of agree on what's real and what's not, how does the country navigate its way through that crisis? Obviously we talked to a lot of our sources and friends in the world of politics, business, national security, technology, and we tried to ground the thing in the real world as much as possible.
In terms of the cyber piece of it, though, how much should we worry about that?
I'm shocked it hasn't happened on a bigger scale, already. It happens every once in a while. You read about something, but at some point, it stands to reason that given how connected everything is and how reliant we are on technology, at some point, one of these vulnerabilities is going to be exploited, and it's going to make a huge difference.
I love end of the world movies, but this is like a little too close to truth. This is so anxiety producing. Is that what you guys were going for with this? This is like a horror flick that really has me creeped out.
When I went to Washington like 12 years ago, the thing that everyone started saying, and has said since then, is that we're going to have like a cyber Pearl Harbor. We're going to have a cyber 9/11. I went to the Department of Homeland Security and I said, what would this look like? And they got out this thing that looked like from the 1950s, and it had like different light bulbs. And like, well, if this happens, this light bulb will go off. This show shows you what this could actually look like. It brings it to life. And if this is truly the threat that experts say it is, it's a way of saying, hey, America, this is what this could be. This is how devastating it could happen. And that's something that lawmakers and no one else can do, but you can do in the space that we are in this show.
Okay, do you think there's any way? I want to talk about De Niro and the whole sort of entertainment aspect of it all, but I'm also just very curious, have you had any feedback from politicians or other people who are saying we got to actually do something about this?
That wouldn't come to me. That would probably come to
I
these
mean,
guys.
Liz, we've heard from, there's been a lot of commentary about how the show seems to mirror developments in the real world. There's a character in the show who's a tech billionaire who's tangling with the government, seems to feel familiar to people for some reason. And so, hearing a lot about that. And, and again, we worked with a lot of cyber
When you were working on the film, though,
Elon a while ago.
That's the crazy thing. I mean, we started on this 4+ years ago.
Right.
So all of the
Elon
things
was
that
not
people
in politics at that point.
No, Biden's cognitive issues were not issues at the time. I mean, there were any number.
So they told us.
So they told us, as far as we knew. But no, there were so many things that happened since, while we were making the show, that we would look at each other on set and go like, is this like, well, this is really getting close. So it was, the tech, the Elon Musk, none of that had happened. And so we just chose to vilify this, character from, Silicon Valley type who you wouldn't want making decisions about really anything, and who yet is making these, huge moves behind the scenes.
I haven't watched it yet, but what causes the zombies to actually? What causes the original reanimation? A virus or something? Or is that? You didn't do that. That's not in episode 7 or 8 or something.
No zombies.
All right. So a different most end of the world.
There's zombies.
There's flesh-eating.
I want to know about De Niro, though. I want to know how you got him to do this.
It's all Eric.
It's funny.
Because he hasn't done a TV show.
No. He. Noah and I had our first conversation in 2021 now, where we were talking about the truth and how we had sort of, as a civilization sort of retreated into these alternate realities. And, Bob obviously is is not shy about his political point of view. But I sat down with him at dinner in LA and I, told him this thing we were working on, and he instantly got it. And he thought, well, it's a compelling story, certainly. And it deals with, this relationship we have with the truth. And also, like all disaster stories, it's really about how we react to it.
Right.
The real disaster.
So here, I want to ask you the big truth question, which is, I think, at least I feel very conflicted about it. There's part of me that feels like I want to know everything. Mm-hmm. I want to know everything. I want everyone to put out whatever they want to say. Right? There's like a free speech thing. I get that.
Yep.
And then there's this other side, which is that in a free speech world where people can make up whatever they want, and that stuff can travel, oftentimes further than the correction can.
Yes.
What the right answer is.
I think what we're trying to say is that it is not in vogue to have a factual-based view of the world and to try and see the world for what it is. People want to see the world and take whatever they can from it to back up their preconceived beliefs. And what we're trying to say is that for us as a society to be successful, I think the more that we can look at things for what they are and not...
How do we do that?
Well, I mean, you're describing both a supply and demand problem, right? There's too much supply of facts and alternative facts.
And the public seems to want all this stuff.
That's the demand side of it. That's the demand side. How do you convince people that they should, shop in multiple sources and build their worldview based on many different perspectives as opposed to only the ones that feel satisfying?
For someone who isn't in this world the way that you guys are, I've done politically themed things. Narcos obviously had some political, American Primeval, there's, some sort of political component too. But I was sort of surprised by the intensity of the kind of, how everything immediately becomes politicized and is either ours or theirs. And, there was a kind of a meta experience making this show, where at some point, while we were filming this scene at the barricades where Bob has this kind of, impassioned speech, that was picked up as Bob engaging with counter-protesters as if it was real. So it's been this very strange experience where, and hopefully, what comes out of it, our hope is at least that, that underneath it all, even when the mechanism by which we determine whether, what's true and not true, the character does the right thing at the end of the show.
But like fundamentally what we're trying to say is like the country's reaction to 9/11 was one thing. The country reacted in a uniformed way that was extraordinary. If 3,000 people were to die in a catastrophic attack today, how would the country respond to that?
You really think we'd respond differently? Because I look back at every, like Pearl Harbor, it always unifies the country and pulls them together. And in hindsight, it looks like it pulls us together for the right
I hate to make it political, but January 6th is a great example where the country did
was
not.
That was like September 11th.
Well, I don't know if it was exactly like September 11th, but it was
in any way, shape, or form. It was like September 11th.
And here we are, and that's so I think the answer
3,000 to 0.
The answer is clear. The answer is clear. If we did have I think you're right. I think today it would be completely polarized.
People said it was worse than September 11th, and those people are fading into oblivion. Thank God.
I don't know about that. Gentlemen, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Really,
thank you guys.
so much.
Eric, Michael, and Noah, the show Zero Day, it's out on Netflix now.
I will say October 7th. I guess you look at that, and that was a very polarizing example, and that surprises me to see how
terrifying.
people come down on that.
Like the initial response was sort of terrifying.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's still terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, folks.
Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And that is the pod for today. Thank you for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. You can tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern to get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears. Follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. That's it. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.